The sky above Trinix 4 was burning. Stars were gone, swallowed by a living darkness that moved like smoke and screamed like wind. Giant Umbra hive ships shaped like open mouths and black wings tore through orbit like blades, firing red pulses that melted defense grids into glowing metal rivers. On the surface, cities fell silent as their skies collapsed. Commander Rollix of the Trinix stood inside a shattered war chamber, surrounded by broken consoles and the last 5 soldiers. Still breathing. His eyes, once bright with silver veins, were now dull. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Send the call." One last time. No one spoke. The enemy outside wasn't just winning, they were erasing history. The Umbra weren't a normal enemy. They didn't invade for resources. They didn't conquer. They devoured. Entire species, cultures, memories. When a world fell to the Umbra, it vanished not just from space, but from the minds of all who survived. Rollix could no longer remember. The names of his home cities, even his mate's face, was a blur. His people, the Trinix, once ruled 9 systems. Now they were surrounded on all sides, their allies either dead or fleeing. Only one word kept echoing in the last broadcasts, repeated again and again in panic and fear. Earth. But Earth had gone silent decades ago. After the Europa massacre, when the humans burned half a moon to stop a rebellion, the United Species Council had voted to exile them from the stars. Earth was feared. Feared for their weapons, feared for their cold logic, feared because they didn't forgive. The humans didn't care about alliances or treaties, and they fought to finish a war, not to survive it. Why? And so they had disappeared, folding their fleets into black rifts no other species could access. "They'll never come," said one of Rollix's soldiers, a young officer named Selen. "They sealed their space." "They don't care," but Rollix pressed the button anyway. He didn't send a speech, no call for help, just one word: Earth. The transmission was encoded in 12 layers of dead protocols, signals no modern system used. A whisper into the dark, one last breath before the storm. Outside, the final planetary shield collapsed. The Umbra High flagship descended, eclipsing the broken moons above. It was not a ship in the traditional sense. It was a structure of black bone, fire, and shadow, surrounded by hundreds of living vessels that screamed as they moved. The Umbra had no language, no diplomats, no face. Doubt. They were story eaters, creatures that fed on memory, leaving blank slates behind. They would not stop. Ever. Selen grabbed Rollix's shoulder. "Sir, it's too late." But Rollix smiled strangely. "It's never too late, if they hurt us." Then it happened. For a moment, time paused. All across the burning battlefield, every scanner, satellite, and mind reader detected something impossible: a black rift opening near the dying sun. No energy spike, no hyperspace signal, just an opening. A crack in reality. One of Rollix's soldiers dropped to his knees. "That's not possible," he whispered. The Umbra ships turned, sensing it too. They had no eyes, no minds, but they understood danger. They felt something old waking up. From the rift, a single ship emerged. Not large, not glowing, not fast, but silent. Blacker than space itself, and covered in ancient human war markings burned into hull armor. It moved. Slowly, then faster, and violently. One Umbra vessel lunged toward its hand, was split in two before it could react. The unknown ship moved through enemy formations like a knife through fabric. It did not fire weapons. It simply disassembled what it touched. And then behind it, the rift grew. 1 became 5. 5 became 20. Within seconds, a fleet unlike any seen in 100 years poured through, silent, angular, terrifying. Earth's war fleet had arrived. But this was not the Earth of old. This was something newer and darker. Each ship was designed not to conquer but to erase. Entire weapon systems no other species had ever seen lit up soundless detonations. Folding missiles, logic disruptors. The Umbra, for the first time in their endless spread, hesitated. Their hive signals grew erratic. Some even pulled back. They had consumed 1,000 worlds, but they had never met Earth's fleet. They had never met Admiral Juno Vega. On board the lead ship Hammerfall, Juno stood in full armor, her face unreadable. She did not look like a savior. She looked like a warning. Her first words were broadcast across all surviving channels. Trinix command. Your transmission was received. Earth responds. Rollix fell to the floor in silence. He had not wept in 50 years. Now he wept. The Hammerfall launched its second wave. Earth's weapons tore open space itself, pulling the Umbra into folds of unreality, severing their link. To the hive. On the surface of Trinix 4, the darkness began to thin. Light returned, not sun, not fire, but the pale light of hope, shaped like black ships with red earth markings. The war wasn't over. Not yet, but something had changed forever. The galaxy had called for help, and Earth had answered not with mercy, but with wrath. And in the silence that followed the burning sky, one thing became clear. The humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had only been waiting. The Umbra didn't run. They had no word for it, no instinct for fear. Their existence was built on devouring, consuming light, life, language, and memory. But when Earth's war fleet arrived from the Black Rift, something broke inside them. Their formation shattered. Hive pulses stuttered. Ships moved out of sync for the first time in recorded galactic history. The sky above Trinix 4, once cloaked in enemy shadow, now burned with Earth's fury. Dozens of sleek, angular human warships moved in silence, surrounded by fields of light-bending armor and weapons that distorted gravity, time, and thought. These were not the cruisers Earth had once traded in peace. These were the ghost ships of ancient military lore. Ships that were said to be buried after the Europa massacre. Ships that, by all galactic law, should not exist. They had names like Vengeance Protocol, Graveborn, and Judgment Vector. All of them black. All of them cold. All of them ready. On board the command ship Hammerfall, Admiral Juno Vega stood before a wall of shifting data. No holograms. Just red and white code printed onto living steel, a system designed before AI was trusted. She didn't need a briefing. She didn't ask for reports. She simply stared at the battlefield with sharp gray eyes and gave her orders. In a calm voice, line break pattern, deltanine, phase armor engaged, remove all Umbra in gridlock sectors, minimal broadcast, maximum impact. Her officers, born from decades of void training, moved without question. No one asked why the fleet had returned. They had trained in secret, far from the galaxy's eye, for exactly this moment. A threat had come. Call had reached Earth. That was enough. Outside, Umbra ships tried to form a second line. Too late, the Vengeance Protocol passed through the center of their wave, using an unknown drive that folded space in pulses. Umbra ships shattered behind it like glass in a storm. No fire, no explosion, just unmaking. Admiral Juno, second in command, Commander Rail, leaned in. We're 30% through their outer flank, no return communication. No central hive ping. Juno responded without turning her head. They don't know what we are. That's our advantage. Never speak to them. Never explain. Not the allies, Rail said, hesitating. They're asking questions. Trinix Command is requesting our ID codes. They want a sitrap. Juno's voice became ice. This isn't diplomacy. This is judgment. The communication line to Trinix 4 stayed silent below. Commander Rollix and his surviving officers stared at the feed in stunned silence. Earth's fleet wasn't just fighting. It was changing the rules of combat. Their weapons didn't target engines or shields. They targeted memory anchors inside Umbra ships, breaking the swarm's psychic cohesion. Rollix had never even known such tech existed. The Trinix had developed advanced phase cannons and self-healing holes. But Earth had built conceptual warheads, bombs that unmade an enemy's identity, erasing them from thought. He looked at Selen, his youngest officer. This fleet, it wasn't supposed to exist. Selen nodded slowly.
At it?
Doesn't. The point. They watched as the judgment vector split into 7 shadow images, each echoing the others in perfect form. Umbra drones fired wildly, unable to lock onto the real one. One by one, the echoes crashed into Umbra ships, real or not. They detonated, folding space inward and collapsing swarm vessels in on themselves. The sky turned red, then white, then empty. Above, Admiral Juno watched the collapse. 70%. Rael blinked. They're retreating. No, Juno said. They're recalculating. Repair. Black directive. Rael hesitated. Are you sure? You haven't used it since Europa, she finished for him. And that worked, didn't it? Rael nodded grimly and keyed the command. Deep inside the Hammerfall's core, a vault unlocked. Inside, a sphere the size of a human head began to glow. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was Echo 9, a biological construct grown from the trauma of Earth's greatest wars, coated with memories from every major extinction event. Echo 9 was not a soldier. It was a story built to infect and overwrite any mind it touched. It had been created for a single purpose: to make the enemy feel everything humans had survived. Admiral Dazoo stepped into the launch chamber. I'll deliver it myself. Rael stepped forward. Admiral protocol is mine to bend, she said flatly. You know what I trained for? Rael swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, Admiral. The Umbra swarm began to reform near the outer edge of the star system. Thousands of vessels converged, building a new hive signal. Their plan was clear: overwhelm Earth's fleet by sheer number and consume them in thought. But Earth hadn't brought a fleet to fight. Earth had brought a mirror, and when the Umbra looked into it, they would finally see something they couldn't understand: a species that remembers pain, uses it as fuel. Juno launched in a wandman stealth craft, carrying Echo 9 inside her neural cortex. She neared the Umbra hive. Their ships opened fire, but their blasts missed. The stealth field bent light, sound, and even probability. Juno moved like a shadow. Then she released the sphere. Echo-9 didn't explode. It whispered. The Umbra heard it, and for the first time in their history, they felt something like doubt. A voice inside their minds began to speak. Memories not theirs. Fire raining on old Earth, the fall of Luna Station, the screams of lost children in oxygenless domes, the fury of a species that would rather burn itself than bow. The swarm began to flicker. Ships spun in confusion. Signals failed. A fracture began in the hive. Back on the Hammerfall, Rael watched the readings. It's working. They're fragmenting, losing cohesion. Juno's voice came over the line, cold and calm. They're not afraid of us yet, but they will be. And as the darkness began to split across the stars, Earth's war fleet prepared for the next move. This wasn't salvation. It was retribution. The Umbra were born from darkness. They thrived in silence. They grew in empty space where no light touched, where no voices sang, where no history lived. They had destroyed hundreds of species, entire civilizations, without ever needing a reason. They did not speak, they did not feel, they did not negotiate. The Umbra were thought to be pure instinct, consuming all memory, all story, all identity, till they met Earth, until they heard Echo 9. That moment changed everything. The whisper, carried into the hive core, had started as a whisper of loss, but it grew faster than the Umbra could adapt. It wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It was a story, but not one the Umbra could ignore. It bled into their minds like water through cracks in rock. Images they had never known began to spread among them. Flames on Earth's first lunar colony, the screams of children in underground bunkers during the Europa massacre, the fury of soldiers who'd chosen death over surrender. The Umbra didn't understand the memories, but they felt them. That was the weakness Earth had waited for. Because once something that never felt begins to feel, it begins to fear. Across the battlefield, the Umbra formations lost their rhythm. Where once they moved in perfect waves, now they twitched, stuttered, and broke off into chaotic spirals. Their hives began sending irregular pulses, some crashing into one another, others spinning away toward empty space. On board the Hammerfall, Commander Rail stared in disbelief at the tactical display. "They're scattering," he said. "Don't understand it. They're abandoning their positions." Admiral Juno Vega stood still, eyes locked on the data. Her voice was almost a whisper. "No, they're not abandoning. They're afraid." It was something no species had ever seen. The Umbro running, not falling back for strategy, not regrouping, running. Juno turned to her command crew. "Deploy secondary fleets. Herd them toward the rift line. Don't let them vanish. The infection must spread." Her officers moved fast. They knew this wasn't just a victory. It was a turning point in galactic history. It's a species that had erased the past of hundreds now found itself infected by memory. Earth's greatest weapon was never its guns, nor its fleet. It was its pain, preserved, refined, and weaponized into a perfect, psychological payload. Scream that echoed forever, far above the main battle, the black shadow of a collapsed moon. The Graveborn observed the chaos. Its captain, an old war veteran named Solviga Juno's twin brother, smiled grimly as he watched the swarm disintegrate. "They looked just like we did. Before we learned to fight with fire," his tactical officer, a tall woman with half her face replaced by cyber armor, nodded. "And like us, they're about to find out there's no going back." The Graveborn opened its vaults and unleashed scream drones, small ships loaded with emotion-triggered memory loops. Each drone was encoded with a specific horror, the last. Words of a mother lost in space, the echo of a child crying in a silent Mars dome, the voice of a dying soldier reciting Earth's anthem as he bled out. The drones didn't fire weapons. They simply played their signals across the battlefield, and the Umbra listened. Couldn't help it. The more they tried to block it, the deeper it went. The more they pushed against it, the more it clung to them. One Umbra cruiser, 5 kilometers long and layered in black bone, turned on its own swarm. It tore into another vessel with blind panic, slamming into its twin like a feral animal. Then it burned in silent explosion. From orbit, Commander Rollix and his surviving Trinix officers watched with wide eyes. Selen whispered, "They're breaking each other." Rollix nodded slowly. "The humans did this." He turned toward the sky where Earth's ships hung like silent gods and added, "This is no rescue. This is punishment." On every allied world receiving the broadcast, beings from dozens of species watched Earth's return unfold with horror, awe, and silent reverence. They had begged for help. Earth had given it, but not with peace, with retribution. For years, the galaxy had shunned Earth. Now they understood why. The humans were not made for peacekeeping. They were not explorers. They were forged in fire, raised in suffering, and trained to remember everything they had lost, then use it like a sword. Inside the swarm, a new signal pulsed. The hive core, buried deep within the Umbrazed source region, had awoken. It began sending a high-frequency call to all Umbraz nodes still coherent. A last command, one desperate order: kill the voice. They finally understood that the fleet wasn't the real threat. It was Econine, the seed of memory, the storyteller, the pain they couldn't silence. The hive turned its full focus on the source. They began hunting the whisper. A dozen ships dove toward the Black Rift, trying to find the Echo-9 signal and end it. But Juno was waiting. She had placed Echo-9 inside a memory mina decoy loop buried in a dozen fake signals. Every time the Umbra found it, the voice exploded. Inside their minds, again louder, stronger. The more they hunted, the more they fed it. Every strike just scattered the pain further, until even their own hive signals carried the infection. In the command chamber of the Hammerfall, Juno finally exhaled. "They're trying to erase us," she said. "But they've already lost, because they made one mistake." Rael looked at her. "What mistake?" Juno turned, eyes cold and quiet. "They gave us time to remember, and that was the secret. Humanity had survived because it never forgot its wars, its losses, its mistakes. Like the Umbra, who erased their enemies to protect themselves, Earth had burned its stories into steel and blood and glass. Now those stories were becoming their greatest weapon. All across the battlefield, Umbra ships flickered. Some collapsed. Others turned and fled into the deep dark between stars, where the whispers followed them still. This wasn't the end of the war, but it was the end of the Umbras. Belief that they were invincible. For the first time in all of recorded history, the galaxy watched the monsters of shadow run, because now the darkness feared what it could never consume, a memory that refused to die. The Umbra swarm fled into deeper space, fracturing as they scattered. Their once perfect unity had become a broken wave of confused fragments, each piece haunted by human pain they couldn't forget. The battlefield above Trinix 4 now floated, silent, filled with drifting wreckage, black Umbra shells, and the steady pulse of Earth's war fleet. But Admiral Juno Vega knew it wasn't over. The Umbra were not finished. They were regrouping. Even fear could evolve. The swarm would rebuild its hive mind around the pain Earth had introduced. They would adapt. They always did. Juno stood in the dim silence of the Hammerfall's war vault, staring at a weapon that most of her officers didn't even know existed. It was locked behind layered code, old metal, and radiation seals. A weapon not made to destroy ships or crush planets. It was something far older, something Earth had hidden after the fall of the Europa colonies. A device never tested in a real war. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. It was called the Forgotten. And it wasn't a bomb. It was a soldier one who had been erased from every official database in the galaxy, in a cryochamber of silver glass. Weapon slept. Its name was once Darian Holt, a soldier lost during Earth's final war with the Martian Breakers. He'd died in battle lore, so the records claimed. But the truth was darker. Darian hadn't died. He had volunteered. His consciousness had been extracted, fragmented, and fused with war code built from Earth's oldest fears. His body, rebuilt in silence, now looked human but wasn't. He no longer had blood in his veins, only memory strands and neural fire. He had been stored deep inside Earth's hidden vaults. Till now, Juno approached the control panel. "He's still stable?" she asked quietly. Her science officer nodded. "Vitals normal. Core heat nominal. Consciousness sync at 90%. We can wake him." Juno paused. She stared through the cryoglass at the thing inside. "Not yet. Prep the battlefield first. I want every Umbra node located. I want them ready." The science officer hesitated. "Admiral, once we release him, there's no way to take it back." Juno's voice was steel. "We don't need him to come back. We need him to finish this." Outside the Hammerfall, Earth's fleet deployed new satellites. Not weapons, not ships. Floating memory cores each. One pulsing with captured human trauma, looping the worst moments in Earth's history in psychic pulses. The Umbra had begun to run. But now they would be dragged back, forced to face every scream Earth had ever carried. In the shadows of a dying gas giant, the Umbra began to stir again. Their confusion was fading. The hive mind restructured itself. It learned, it adapted. And from the darkness came something new. A hive seed, larger than any known vessel, covered in writhing bone tentacles and glowing black eyes. It was not just a ship. It was a core node, a new hive center. And it had one goal: erase Echo 9 before the infection spread across the stars. But they were too late. Juno activated the chamber. Inside the vault, Darian's eyes opened, not blinking, not waking slowly, but wide, sharp, and full of fire. He stepped forward without command, the cryoglass melting around him as his neural heat surged. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He could feel the swarm. He could hear their signals in his bones, their fear in his veins. He smiled slightly, a cold expression that had nothing human left in it. Juno met his gaze. "You know your mission?" Darian nodded. His voice was quiet, almost too calm. "I remember everything." He stepped into the drop pod without armor, without weapons. His body was the payload, his mind the virus. When the pod launched, it bent reality around it, slipping between Umbra detection systems, drifting silent and fast toward the hive seed. On board, The hive seed, the swarm began to shake. No alarms, no spoken warnings. Just a sudden, unbearable presence. The closer Darien got, the more the Umbra hive screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was memory ripping through their neural pathways. Darien was more than Echo 9. He was every lost soldier Earth had ever buried, stitched together in one endless scream. When he landed inside the hive seed, he didn't need a gun. The Umbra came for him and fell apart without being touched. Their bodies twisted, their thoughts unraveled. 'Cause Darien didn't attack them, he made them remember. And for beings that only knew consumption memory was death. Back on the Hammerfall, Rail monitored the hive seed. Admiral, it's collapsing. Internal stress levels off the charts. Their psionic matrix is fracturing. Juno didn't blink. Good, let it burn. Rail looked again. Wait, there's something new, a pulse, something Earth didn't send. Juno turned sharply. Show me. On screen, a new signal blinked inside the Umbra network, a single glyph repeated in chaotic rhythm. Rail translated it slowly. They're trying to speak. Juno's face hardened. They're begging. She watched the hive seed begin to twist in on itself, its tentacles turning inward. She said nothing for a long time, then quietly let them scream. Inside the hive seed, Darien stood among the broken remains of the Umbra. All around him, the darkness turned to dust. He looked up once and whispered a name that no one had used in 100 years. A name that meant hope. A name that once belonged to Earth's first lost colony. We remember. And then the hive seed exploded. In fire, not in light, but in silence. Total erasure. A scream that pulled itself inward. When the wave passed, the system was quiet. Empty, clean. No Umbra remained. On the Hammerfall, Juno turned away to begin preparing the next phase. Rail looked at her. There's more. She nodded slowly. We've won the battle. Now, we tell the rest of the galaxy what comes next. Because Earth's fleet had not returned to defend allies, it had returned to finish what the others were too afraid to begin. The silence after the hive seed's destruction did not last long. Never does in a galaxy full of watching eyes, trembling empires, and uneasy alliances. When Earth's warfleet destroyed the Umbra core node, it didn't just eliminate a threat, it shifted power. The Trinics, the Valari Commonwealth, the Sandric Accord, and even the elusive Charn Syndicate had seen it. Across hundreds of systems, the event was broadcast as fragments. Black ships with no registry. Umbra vessels imploding without weapons. In one manif, he was still a man walking through a storm of psychic terror like a ghost. Earth had answered. The call for help. But the way they answered made the galaxy nervous. Too efficient. Too ruthless. Too silent. And now, the same allies who had once begged for Earth's return were asking a different question. If they can destroy the Umbra, so, Isoli, what will they do next? Admiral Juno Vega stood inside the secure council room on the Hammerfall. Surrounded by high-level commanders, her war coat still stained from the last battle's heat. Her face gave away nothing, but the lines around her eyes had grown deeper. She knew the message would come, and it did. A secure channel from the Valari High Council lit up in blood-red priority code. Admiral Vega, by order of the Allied Protocol Charter, you are requested to stand down Earth's fleet. Your deployment of non-sanctioned weapons and psychological warfare tools constitutes a breach of peace. Juno didn't even flinch. She answered with one word. Denied. The line cut instantly. No argument, no debate. The Valari didn't. Try again. Instead, their warships began shifting positions around the edges of Trinic space. The Trinics Republic followed next, launching satellites near Earth's staging points. The message was clear. Earth had won too hard. And now, even, its allies wanted it contained. Commander Rail entered the chamber. They're forming a blockade, he said grimly. Our former friends. Juno didn't even turn. That was always the plan. They feared us more than they feared the Umbra. Rail hesitated. What should we do? They're not the enemy. Juno turned her head now, slowly. A threat, is a threat. There was no malice in her tone, just cold fact. Earth hadn't forgotten why it left the Galactic Council. They had begged for unity once. It offered trade, culture, science. In return, they were isolated, mocked for their death world evolution, and finally abandoned during the Europa burnings. Humanity had learned. It had stopped asking for help, and when the galaxy cried out again, Earth had responded, but on its own terms. Elsewhere on the Volari command ship, Star Empress, High Commander Yevil paced before her advisors. We need to act before the humans decide we are next. Her science advisor shook his head. If we strike first, we'll confirm their fears. Yevil snapped. They've already confirmed our nightmares. You saw what they did? That wasn't military intervention, it was species-level dominance. The Charn envoy added, We've contacted 6 other powers. A joint command strike is possible. Disable the Earth fleet. Isolate the Echo units. Contain Admiral Vega. None of them mentioned Darian Holt. No one wanted to say the name of the thing that walked like a man but carried extinction in his breath. Back on the Hammerfall. Darian sat alone in a sealed room. His mind moved through fractured timelines, moments of pain stitched together into clarity. He could hear the movements of fleets in distant systems. He didn't need sensors. The memories in him were alive, evolving, and they knew fear when. They felt it. They're coming, he said calmly. Not the Umbra. The others. Juno entered, arms crossed. How many? All of them, Darian replied. They think this is about control. They're wrong. This is about memory. Juno stepped closer, and remind them. When the Allied Armada appeared at the edge of Trinic space, Earth's fleet was already aligned. No retreat, no message, just silence. The Graveborn, Judgment Vector, Ash Protocol, and dozens more took position in layered rings. The stars darkened, as weapon bays opened not to fire, but to broadcast. One by one, the Echo drones launched. But this time, they didn't carry war memories. They carried Allied betrayal, holograms, voices, recordings of the Council debates during the Europa crisis. Images of how the Trinics had pulled support, how the Volari had refused to evacuate civilians, how the Charn had sold human defense. Codes to the Umbra, the fleet didn't attack it, reminded. A psychological siege. Not a shot fired, but minds began to break. On the Star Empress, High Commander Yevil watched the data flood in. Her crew fell silent. One wept openly. Is this real? Someone asked. These are old lies, but the truth was undeniable. Humans hadn't fabricated the files, they had recorded them. All of it, every meeting, every betrayal. Earth had never forgotten. It had simply waited. The Allied fleet hesitated, and then something worse. Dor stepped into the signal field. His voice didn't boom. It whispered, carried on every frequency. We didn't return for vengeance. We returned because you needed saving, but now you want us silent again. You want us to forget? We can't, and we won't. He paused then. If you still want to fight, come, but we don't kill to conquer, we kill to remember. The silence that followed was deep. No ship moved. The galaxy had cried for help, Earth had. Answered now, Earth waited for the galaxy's decision. The armadas hovered in the black sea of space, weapons ready, tension stretched tight like a wire about to snap. No one spoke. No one dared to be the first to fire. On one side floated Earth's war fleet calm, silent but unshakably present. They didn't posture, they didn't bluff, they waited. On the other side, the combined fleets of 6 galactic powers shifted nervously in formation, struggling to maintain unity even as their own soldiers began questioning why they were there. Echo drones had pierced every command ship, every hangar, bay, and every crew deck. Memory loops flooded screens raw, unedited, irrefutable proof of what had happened years ago. The images of betrayal weren't rumors or reconstructions, they were recorded truth. The Volari watching their council abandon Earth's colonies. The Trinics voting to cut medical aid to dying human outposts. The Charn selling access routes to the Umbra. The Allies had once watched Earth bleed and did nothing. Returned not for revenge, but with the weight of history weakened, in the High Council's flagship. The Celestial Spear leaders from each faction sat in silent shame. Some trembled, others stared at their boots. I, Commander Yvel once, so fierce in her demands to control Earth, was pale and wordless. The room felt colder than space itself. Finally, the Trinix representative, a war general named Sarvik, spoke. "We have to do something. Our fleets are in firing range." His voice was thin, forced. The Valari Prime diplomat shook her head. "What good will it do? Fire, and we erase any chance of trust. Fall back, and we admit we're guilty." The Charn simply muttered, "We are guilty." Silence followed again. Then a soft voice cut through the tension. It belonged to the youngest council member, a scientist from the Sandric Accord. She spoke only one word: "Listen." And outside, in the vacuum of stars, Earth's broadcast continued, not with threats, but with voices. A loop began playing across every allied ship. No encryption, no filter. The voices of Earth's survivors, a child speaking from a burned Mars shelter, a mother screaming for air in a Trinix-run mining colony, a soldier whispering a final goodbye during the fall of the Titan Ridge. These weren't leaders. These weren't warriors. These were the forgotten, the people the Council had left behind. The sound of their suffering wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. That made it worse. It was real. Admiral Juno Vega stood on the bridge of the Hammerfall, staring at the Allied formations. "They're breaking her," Comm's officer said. "The Valari have shut down their weapons. The Sandaric fleet is pulling back." Rael leaned forward. "They're not firing?" Juno didn't move. "No, not yet. But it's not enough. They need to decide. Not just stop aiming at us. They need to choose who they are." At her side, Darian Holt closed his eyes. He felt it. The hesitation. The cracks in the alliances. The shame. It was unfamiliar to him, but powerful. It was the one thing he had never carried. Regret. The allies were not fearless like the Umbra, but they were not blind either. Their guilt had weight. And that weight was finally pulling them toward something new in the council chamber. Debate returned, but it was different this time. It wasn't about power. It was about atonement. "What if we ask Earth what they want?" Someone said. "What if we try to repair this?" Another offered. High Commander Yvel stood at the center and took a deep breath. "We spent years shaping a lie. Earth was too wild, too violent, too different. But the truth is we feared them because they reminded us of what we buried. Pain, memory, responsibility, and now we have a choice. Do we keep pretending, or do we answer?" A single transmission was sent. It came not from ships, but from the council itself. Short message, 12 words. "We abandoned you. We remember now. Tell us how to begin." On the Hammerfall, Juno heard it. She closed her eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer, but her shoulders eased. "They finally listened," she said. Rael stepped forward. "What now?" Juno looked out at the stars. "We give them a truth they're not ready for." She turned to her officers. "Broadcast. The second archive. Show them not what we suffered, but what we survived. Show them Earth's rebuilding, the colonies we saved, the alliances we honored. Let them see the full story." And across the stars, a second wave of memory flooded the galaxy. The moment the last Europa bunker reopened, the first child born on Reclaimed, Luna, the handshake between former enemies in the ashes of the Mercury front. Earth didn't just carry pain, it carried rebirth. The fleet stood still, but inside, everything had changed. The Allies no longer saw Earth as a weapon. They saw it as a warning and a path. Because Earth's war fleet had shown them not just how to fight, it had shown them how to remember and how to choose something better. From the edge of the galaxy, beyond the known maps and navigational lanes, something ancient stirred. The Umbra were not gone. While Earth's fleets helped unite the shattered council, and while memory reshaped alliances, the swarm had not stopped. They had not forgotten. Deep in the dark sectors, where light from stars had never reached, survivors of the Hive Seed collapse gathered. They didn't flee, they evolved. The trauma of Earth's psychological strike had not only damaged them, it had forced them to adapt. Pain was no longer just something they feared. Now they understood it. And what they understood, they intended to waponize. In the silence of Umbra Prima space, where time fractured in psionic. Waves echoed without form, the new hive consciousness pulsed. It was unlike anything the galaxy had faced before, no longer just a mindless swarm. The Umbra now had a memory. And in that memory, one figure stood out. The ghost soldier who had walked through their minds like fire. Darian Holt. The Umbra named him without words. In their thoughts, he was the breaker of silence. And if they were to reclaim the stars, they would have to end him first. On board the Hammerfall, Juno Vega stood at the edge of her ship's holomap, her brow tight with worry. "We're detecting massive energy shifts beyond the Omega Drift," her science officer said. "But it's not fleet movement, it's like neural radiation." Darian stood nearby, his gaze distant. "They're sending a message," he said softly, "not to us. To themselves. They're calling what's left back together." Rail stepped closer, uneasy. "They're regrouping." Darian turned his eyes to him, colder than usual. No. They're evolving. They're doing what we did. Remembering." The words chilled everyone in the command chamber. For the first time, the humans realized the consequences of awakening emotion in a species that had never known it. The Umbra were no longer mindless. They were learning from the pain. They were ready to use it. All across Allied space, faint pulses began disrupting communications. Drones went offline. Old probes vanished. Ships suffered malfunctions without warning. Systems once clear of Umbra's signals now sparked with shadows, faint, erratic, like breathing. The swarm was moving, but this time not as hunters, as something worse. They were thinking, planning, choosing the council, freshly united. Under the painful truth of their past mistakes, held an emergency summit. Holograms of every leader hovered above the core chamber. "They're coming back," said Sarvik of the Trinix. "But they're not the same," the Valari diplomat added. "We taught them emotion. Earth showed them what it meant to suffer, and now they're using it." Juno appeared through a secure transmission. "Then we finish what we started. Not with another fleet. With him." Every head turned as Darian Holt stepped into view. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't carry weapons. He stood like a monument's card, steady and unreadable. "You made me a weapon to end the darkness," he said calmly. "Now the darkness knows what I am, and it's calling me." The council fell silent. "Can you stop them?" someone asked. Darian didn't answer right away. They were never meant to feel. That was their power emptiness. But we shattered that. Now they remember, and their minds are breaking under the weight. "I don't need to destroy them. I need to finish the memory." Rail looked confused. "What does that mean?" Darian stepped forward. "They felt our pain, but not our hope, not our reason for surviving. That's what they don't understand." Realized it in that moment. The Umbra had only seen one side of the human story loss. Rage, vengeance, but not the part that came after. The rebuilding. The healing. The story was incomplete. The swarm had filled in the rest with only fire. On the edge of the Omega Drift, Earth's fleet formed up, not in battle formation, but in a shape designed to carry signal arrays. Every ship became a speaker, every deck a story. Earth had loaded its archives, from the fall of old cities to the rise of new ones. Images of unity, survival, love, and growth were embedded into the next wave of echo drones. It was not a battle planet, it was a message. Darian would be its carrier. In a single ship, a sleek obsidian dart called the Threshold, Darian departed alone. No guns, no fleet behind him, just memories. He crossed into the dark. The Umbra welcomed him, their ships curling like shadows, forming a path into the heart of their hive. He passed ancient wreckage ruins of fleets long forgotten. The bones of empires the Umbra had devoured. They were waiting. Inside the hive core, Darian arrived. Round him, the void pulsed with fractured thoughts. The pain Earth had shared still echoed here, deeper now. but it was twisted, shaped by minds that had never known balance. The Umbra didn't want to kill Darien. They wanted to consume him. To take the rest of Earth's memory, to fill the missing pieces with terror, to complete the story in their image, but Darien had brought something they never expected. He sat in the center of the hive and activated the final memory. It wasn't horror, it wasn't fire, it was forgiveness. The image of Earth's first rebuilt. Colony after the Europa burnings. Children laughing on Mars. Peace ceremonies between old human enemies. Tributes sent to alien worlds, even ones that had once betrayed Earth. The message was clear. We suffered. But we did not become monsters. You still can choose, the hive screamed. Not in rage, in confusion. The swarm, fractured ships spiraled out. The hive's minds turned against each other. Some remembered pain and recoiled. Others remembered hope and froze. The Umbra had been built on silence, perfected in emptiness. But now they were filled with emotion they could not carry. And so they collapsed not in fire, but in memory. On board the Hammerfall, Rail watched the data, their fleets breaking apart. Not from outside pressure, from inside. Juno didn't speak. She just whispered. He did it. Later, the last Umbra signal faded. Quiet, finished, but not erased. Darnholt had vanished into the hive core. He had not returned. No trace. Only his message remained. In a new silence, not one born of fear, but of understanding. The stars were quiet again, but this silence was not like the one before. This was not the silence of fear or grief or war waiting to happen. This was something different, something earned. Across thousands of systems, from the Golden Towers, of the Valari homeworld to the dust-covered colonies on the Martian fringe, a stillness had spread. The Umbra were gone. No signals, no fleets, no screams from the void. Their entire swarm had simply stopped. But in their place, something else remained. A pulse. A presence. A signal that echoed across deep space. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't violent. It was just human. The council named it the Echo. No one could trace its origin exactly, but everyone knew what it was. The message that Darien Holt had delivered before he vanished inside the heart of the Umbra hive continued to bounce from star to star. It was simple images of laughter after tragedy, peace after chaos, rebirth after loss. It played in alien temples, on warships, on backwater trader screens, and inside royal halls. It played without force, without demand. Just a memory, a final gift. And with it came change. On Valari Prime, statue was erected not of a war hero or a fleet, but of a single human child holding a broken mask, the symbol of truth revealed. In the Trinix Republic, an official apology was issued across all networks. We left Earth to die. They came back and showed us how to live. The Charn Syndicate, long known for secrecy and greed, released thousands of restricted files, including the darkest records of their past dealings with the Umbra. Across the galaxy, the story was finally being told, not by force, but by remembrance. And still, no one had found Darien Holt. Many believed he was gone forever, consumed by the very thing he sought to stop. Others believed he had become the Echo itself, that his mind lived on in the signal, watching, guiding. But Admiral Juno Vega didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in choices. And Darien had made one. She stood alone in Earth's rebuilt council hall, the new capital resting above the blue curve of the Atlantic sky platform. Behind her stretched a wall of names carved into steel, endless, glowing faintly. They were not just soldiers. They were civilians, doctors, teachers, refugees, people from every corner of Earth who had lived through the silent years. At the very top of the list, in the center of the wall, was a single line: Darien Holt, Echo 9 status, unknown mission, completed Drail. Walked in quietly behind her. They want to give him a posthumous rank, he said. A monument, maybe rename. The fleet. Juno shook her head. No, she looked up. Darien wasn't a symbol. He was a message. You don't build monuments to a message. You pass it on. Rael nodded slowly. Still, without him, this fleet would have torn the galaxy apart. Juno gave a quiet smile. And he knew that. That's why he showed them the truth instead. As they stood in silence, a soft alert pinged on the council wall. A new signal, not a warning. Just a low frequency, pulse soft, rhythmic. Not from Earth. Not from the Umbra. It came from a quiet system on the edge of nothing. A barren moon that hadn't held life for 1,000 years. But now, a small satellite was active. Its power source, echo signature, its beacon name, Threshold 9. Rails. Eyes widened. That's his ship. Juno didn't hesitate. Prepare a team. We're going. When they arrived, there was no wreckage. No debris. Just a sleek black vessel resting peacefully on the frozen moon, untouched by time or war. Inside, it was silent. Powered down. But in the central command seat lay something, an old metal data core marked only with one symbol. A hand-holding. A burning star. Earth's original survival mark. Rael picked it up carefully. Is it him? Juno took the device and smiled softly. No, it's his story. They brought it home, and when they opened it, the final chapter played. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. I gave myself willingly. Not to destroy, but to finish something the galaxy never let us start. You feared us, that's fine. But we were never just soldiers, we were survivors. And now, so are you. Remember that, not just today, every time. You look into the stars. Every time peace feels easy. Because peace was never easy. We paid for it with silence, blood, and memory. If this echo remains, then so do I. After that, there were no more wars not like before. Earth didn't become a galactic empire. It didn't conquer. It didn't rule. It led quietly, like a shadow behind the stars. Its fleet remained, stronger than ever, but never used in anger again. Its soldiers trained not just in weapons, but in truth. And its story became the one thing the galaxy could agree on. A story of a species born on a death world, a people shaped by pain, but who chose, given the power to heal instead. Of destroy, the galaxy didn't forget, because the echo never let them.